as testing, test, yep. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2016 Magic Q&A panel. Yes, welcome, welcome. We are here. This is a good cross-section of Magic's creative team. We are here to talk to you about what we do, about what we've done, how we make decisions, how we do our jobs. We're here to answer questions and for you to put faces and names together. So if you have a question, please line up. We're going to introduce ourselves. Line up behind the microphone. Go ahead. This is a Q&A. So hopefully people have questions.
Who are you?
So, yes, for introductions, my name is Jeremy Jarvis. I am principal designer, Magic Worlds and IP.
My name is Tyler Jacobson. I'm a concept artist on the creative team, and I'm also a magic artist.
Oh, I have my own. Here we go. My name's Cynthia Shepard. I am an art director, also magic illustrator, and was on the concept art team for Kaladesh in Origins, and came back to do more Kaladesh stuff later.
I'm Doug Beyer. I'm a senior game designer on the creative team. I was the world building lead for Kaladesh, the lead conceptor, and I was on the design and development teams.
And I'm James Wyatt, writer of things. I have add 2,000 words to target manuscript. And I've been a writer for the art books, the Zendikar, Innistrad, and forthcoming Kaladesh ones. And that's that.
Hi. My question is about the magic story we saw a couple weeks back where we saw the Gatewatch hanging out in Ravnica. There was this moment where Gideon and Jace were asked who was in charge, and they kind of looked at each other, and there was this tension like, well, I have one job, Jace is like, I have a different job. Is that tension more like they both kind of want to be in charge, or more that neither one of them wants to be in charge, or they can't hear me?
Sorry, we're having trouble hearing your question.
Okay. As I was saying, in the previous Magic story, back on Ravnica, there you go, now you can hear me. There was this moment where the Gatewatch was asked who was in charge, and Jace and Gideon kind of stared at each other and were like, well, Jace has one role, Gideon has another role. Is that tension kind of both of them wanting to have an wanting to be in charge, or kind of neither one of them wanting to be in charge? What's the tension there?
I do think that both of them consider themselves to be in charge of the Gatewatch. I feel like Jace feels like he knows the long-term plan and knows how the team should be run. And Gideon is a natural leader and has sort of the moral center of the team. I think we'll see them disagree on that point going forward. There's not a declared leader, but they both sort of claim that position for themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to get a question from from our community.
So this comes from the Magic EU account. How does it feel for you to work on an optimistic world as opposed to a pessimistic one?
Optimistic.
He took my answer. That's nice, yeah. It's sort of a change of mood around the office sometimes.
Yeah, no, we knew that after Innistrad, people were going to be ready for a change of pace. The tone of the whole Eldrazi arc was just nailing an awesome tone that we really wanted to see, but we knew that after that time, people would want something fresh, bright, sunny skies. So that determined not just our choice of worlds for what came after Innistrad, but also the direction we took with this Etherpunk world.
A lot of what we do as well is trying to tell the story visually. And so in really executing on something like Eldritch Moon, like when we're doing a good job, visually, it's pretty heavy-handed, right? It's when you know it's working. And so it's like, oh my God, that's so gross. Good, no, it's perfect, it's perfect. So Kaladesh and its optimism, you know, we try to visualize that as well. And so it feels great to be able to know it's working when it's like, Oh, it's beautiful. Good. We can stop.
And some of our artists were happy to have some of their colors back in their palette.
Yeah.
Like we restricted them. It's like, no. No orange, no yellow. Those don't happen now.
I talked a little bit yesterday about the difference in tone in the story as well, that this is a chance for us, for the Gatewatch to take a breather and for us to tell a different flavor of story for a little while, where they have a chance to get to know each other better and exploring some of that interaction, like who's in charge here.
Hi, team.
Hi.
Hi.
So, Kaladesh looks great so far. It looks also to be one of the more technologically themed sets in recent memory. In the past, Magic has made a very concerted effort to maintain its identity by having restrictions as far as, you don't want it to look too Final Fantasy-esque, too technologically advanced. So what kind of challenges did you face trying to get across that technological steampunk feel while still maintaining the core identity of Magic the Gathering as it has been for 20 years?
So yeah, this was, we knew we were going to do a set heavy in artifacts, heavy in technology, a place where we wanted to do inventions and devices. So the question is, how do you still make this a Magic world? It's still a fantasy world. So part of that is that the inventions, as you'll see, the devices, their design still weaves in a look of being driven by magic. A lot of them look functional, and yet there's some part of them that couldn't actually work. Like, how do the skyship stay up? Or how does this one, arm, this bracelet or whatever, like do its thing? Ultimately, it involves ether, which is a magical substance. So that's sort of our ultimate, this is still a Magic world. This is still fundamentally driven by magic. And you'll see that the world has many elements that are still focused on mana and the natural world. But that's pretty much it, that the devices ultimately still had to be rooted in a fantasy look.
Hello. So, question request. First off, yesterday the members of R&D talked about the iteration process and what they went through to arrive at the mechanics for Kaladesh. Can you speak about some of the scrapped ideas and how you got from A to B as far as the art and look of the plane? And then two, can you guys try and include some of that early art and material online more often? Because I really enjoy seeing that stuff.
Cool. Sure. So there is a Kaladesh art book, by the way, so that will be real. So how we got from A to B was starting with the need for, we wanted an artifact plane, right? We wanted to do that, coming after 6 months on Innistrad. So we wanted it to feel very different and fresh. Now that we are going to 2 worlds a year, that was part of the criteria. Like, we love Innistrad, we love Gothic horror. We knew it was going to be dark. We knew it was going to be kind of John Carpenter's The Thingy at the end. And so we wanted to swing the pendulum to something bright, fresh, colorful. So what does that mean with an artifact plane? It certainly doesn't mean New Phyrexia, right? So we needed to do something new. A thing we haven't done before is Magic's take on steampunk. So that was our starting point. But again, we wanted something tonally optimistic. We didn't want the soot in the air. We didn't want all the relentless brown color. So we started talking. Doug actually had the idea because we wanted Kaladesh to be Chandra's home world. And there are 2 adjacent A's in her last name. And to start moving towards this a take of a fantastical India that is informing steampunk visually. And then the more we talked about it, the more it was like, yeah, let's not do the top hats, let's not do the goggles, let's not do the British stuff, and just keep the inventiveness, keep the airships, and just build this whole new place that no one's ever seen before. And so we just really decided to kind of build a fantasy India and use that to be this optimistic replacement for a steampunk setting that we call etherpunk. Does that answer your question? Great.
one thing I wanted to add is that the Zendikar and Innistrad art books got some criticism for not having any concept art in them. So the appendix of the Kaladesh book will show off some of that work in progress stuff.
Another question from our online community.
This question comes from Joe Lim. What about the Aetherborn makes them black?
So the Aetherborn were a solution to a problem. We definitely wanted a world where undead and necromancy wouldn't really make sense. And we wanted a role that would fit Kaladesh and yet fit the values of black at the same time. So this is kind of black's greed and ambition twisted in a kind of a Kaladesh way. The Aetherborn love luxury. They love partying for themselves. They love living their lives to the fullest, and in that way, they're seeking their own goals, right? They're kind of they're the consummate urbanites, and that they're willing to take every moment of the life that they have for themselves. It's an interesting twist. It's definitely more of a challenging version of a black-aligned race, but we thought that it was really hitting what Kaladesh needed and a cool twist on black for this world.
Let me add just a little bit to that. They also, insofar as Kaladesh does have a seedy underbelly, the Aetherborn represent it to a large extent. We saw Crime Lord Gonti yesterday as a shining, dark example of that.
Hello. I'm very excited about the storyline cards because they add a really great depth to gameplay as well as fill out the world. And for example, casting Deicide on Xenagos is an amazing experience. However, that comes with its own set of challenges because in the past few sets, we've kind of seen the climax and the resolution in card form in the same set. So when we were introduced to Ulamog, we also had a Lydon-Hedron network in the same set, and then Emrakul was imprisoned in the moon. So they kind of spoiled the story a little bit. What are you guys' thoughts on that moving forward?
I have thoughts on this. So it drives me crazy that we spoil our own stories. We're learning how this is being received every set, though. We're learning more about how to schedule the stories so that more of them run sooner before the whole card set is known, and taking more care with the selection of what cards show. We want people to know what major story events happen, and that's why we're embedding them in the card set. We want people to know, like if someone dies or something important, crucial thing happens, we want to depict that because a lot of players are not reading every single story. But going forward, I think we're going to take a look at what we need to do to make sure the story creates a great experience, so that you're not finding out the tension is not evaporated by the card set itself. That's not the intention. So work needs to be done there. It's something we're definitely looking at, but we're definitely excited that we're seeing more moments from the story in the card set.
We've definitely learned to be very decisive about what is in set 1 and what is in set 2. Like for Shadows over Innistrad, there was a very brief conversation that should the last card in the set, which is kind of meaningless, show Emrakul rising, right? And we decide nope, because as soon as the visual spoiler's released, all things simultaneously, so that just gets moved an entire 3 months later. So that's the biggest thing. Then beyond that, we're making incremental gains in promo selection, of not using story spotlights for promo cards that will be shown early. That happened to us with Shadows over Innistrad, right, with one of the first cards being seen being Anguished Unmaking, and we're like, oh man, really could have used a couple weeks before we showed that. So some of it's communication, some of it's just really definitive decision making, and then to Doug's point, trying to run some stories earlier and figuring out how to better use the tools that we have.
Hey, so Nissa, when we saw her in Zendikar Block, she was very different from how she appeared in Origins and going forward. How do you feel about this? Are we going to see something that kind of bridges the two Nissas, or have we always been at war with East Asia?
Is this me? So we've been, like, Nissa's been the hardest nut to crack of all the Gatewatch characters. And we've really found our stride, I think, with Kaladesh of showcasing Nissa as an awesome character. She's been moving around in part because some of that is natural just because you get different authors writing different characters. And, you know, like different authors of a comic or whatever get a slightly different take on the superhero character or whatever. But we've really focused Nissa going forward. I think you'll see, and she's been able to take the events of BFC and into SOI as a kind of a formative stage, and she's going to emerge with kind of a new role through the Gatewatch into Kaladesh.
Another question from our online community.
This question comes from Adrian Kelly. What is your process of selecting artists and artwork for cards? During the design stage, what point is the artwork called for and chosen?
All right, an art question. Yes. So the latter part of that question first. The rules are written. The art and story teams work together to create the outlines, the descriptions that artists get when we commission card art. The first part of that question, how do we select the artists? I'll preface this by saying that Jeremy Jarvis used to be the sole art director commissioning art for cards, and now there's 3 of us. So there's myself, Mark Winters, and Dawn Murin. And so there's this tense 2 to 4 days out of every art wave where we sort of fight with each other over who gets to use which artist, and, you know, we're all working on things at the same time. It's a lot of fun. Sometimes it's knock down, drag out, but you know, we try to place people with artwork that fits their strengths a lot of the time. Sometimes we push people out of their comfort zone a little, but we tend to know who does well in what space and try to pick the best person for the job.
My question is actually pretty similar. It's how much direction do you give the artists for each piece? How do you make sure it maintains the story you want to tell and still allow the artist to, like Therese Nielsen, do these brilliant abstract pieces, but you can still create a card like Deicide, which tells a very specific moment in a very specific way?
So that consistency comes from a really tight world guide, which is what all the concept art that we do is developed for. It's also, again, about picking people who are really good at certain types of narrative or certain types of character with expression that will work really well for those stories. Did you want to talk any about the world guide?
Sure. A lot of it to us, in order to give the artist as much freedom as we can, because we want that. Like, every card, the art director needs an artist partner to complete and visualize that card. So we want that partner to have as much freedom as possible while we're still covering our needs, right? At the end of the day, we don't want a hodgepodge that it's like, I don't know, it's kind of a thing. So we front load a lot of work among ourselves. We start world building very early, making some decisions. We have a concept push. We invite 5 artists in for 3 weeks and have this big creative explosion. That content is most of what ends up being the world guide. So we have this reference, and not like an animation style sheet where it's like, it's exactly this and exactly this color. It's more design parameters of like, here are examples of the world, here is the space you have to work in, solve it as best you can. And then if we assign the correct artist, the correct art description, you know, we're able to give them a good amount of freedom because we pick the right person for the right job and they can personalize it. And sometimes that is very specific, and we're going to Jason Chan and saying, this is the moment that Heliod, you know, that Elspeth strikes down Xenagos. It happens in Nyx. We knew stuff from the book. It was a very, you know, a very dense art description. And there's other times where we're like, we need an abstract representation of time stopping. So solve that somehow. Work in the parameters of the world guide, but you can figure it out. So.
I have a convenient community follow-up to that question. From an illustrator's perspective, how do you take that art direction and put it into your own work?
That's you. I guess I'll answer this. Oh, shoot. So typically, I just try and create exciting moments for the cards. So having that style guide in front of me lets me see, like, oh, this is what the world is. This is where everyone lives. So I can then, I guess, as you flip through, you see all the different shapes and I guess we call it shape language that is associated with the universe. And that gets me in the space to just build a new world and try and fit it in that little tiny 2-inch frame. But it's a challenge, and it's a really fun one. So you're a magic artist too, Cynthia. You could answer this.
What he said. No. No, I mean, I always appreciate really tight art direction. I try to learn from Jeremy and try to incorporate some of his hands-offness, but at the same time directness when he does have something that he needs us to do into my own art direction. We'll see if I'm there, but yeah, that's.
Oh yeah. Well, just to add to that, there's a great quality to these art directors in that they allow the artist's style to, I guess, sing on the card. They don't really, they don't tear it down. They use that as a feature, which is really nice.
Hi, folks. Totally brand new guy who's never asked a question about Kaladesh before. So, regarding the art of this set, so far everything we've seen has been gorgeous. It's all filigreed, it's beautiful, pastels. Now, India is a huge and vibrant culture. What inspirations did you pull to create this world? Like, which cultures, which kind of areas, regions perhaps, did you pull from to build this city that we're in now?
Sure. So what we were looking for were shapes, like just thinking about architecture, right? What shapes would be evocative of what a broad base of people know about India, right? And then trying to find ways to replicate those shapes, replicate that silhouette with new materials. Like obviously India is not made out of filigree metal, but you can still replicate those big shapes and silhouettes and be evocative in a way that puts those pictures in people's heads and gives them that connection. The same thing with the cut of clothing, the way asymmetry is a part of that. The combination of colors, trying to find ways to map the color of festivals and holidays and weddings, because Magic doesn't get to indulge in those things. Like it's at the end of the day a game about fighting, but we love that color, and so that's why Sahili is dressed the way she is, because it's like we don't get the festival, take that color and map it on a character, right? So that we get to have those visuals. One of the things we really love to do, or I love to do anyway, it's one of my go-tos, when there is a cultural or historical basis, is to take the patterning from the clothing and put it on the buildings, or take the mosaics from the floor and put it on the shields, so that it's not something you've seen before, but it's just right. It's just like, yes, this resonates. So a lot of it was taking those things and finding ways to remap it and recreate silhouettes. That was a lot of the inspiration.
Hi, I have a question that isn't about the art at all. It's about Liliana. Does she care about the other members of the Gatewatch at all? Is there still any of the healer she was when she was younger in the current Liliana?
That one?
Liliana is a wonderfully complex character. One of the little bits that I put into her origin story for Magic Origins was a moment of hesitation before she gave up her soul, in effect, which let her tell herself that she was still okay. She has a very complicated relationship with Jace based on their history together, and I think it's pretty clear that she wants to not care at all about him, and she kind of does. We're just really starting to explore her relationships with the other members of the Gatewatch. I think that's going to get really interesting. And yeah, there's a lot still to explore with her.
I mean, I love that question being asked just because that's exactly the question we're hoping that people are asking. Like, what's ultimately in Liliana's brain? Does she care about these people? Or is she using these people? She has 2 more demons to take care of. She could use a force of powerful planeswalkers around her, but does she actually care about them as friends? That's part of the kinds of questions we love coming up and getting the Gatewatch together.
So I have a question about the Gatewatch in general. So the Gatewatch is just a bunch of planeswalkers who travel planes to planes and kind of finding solutions to the problem on the planes. Would there be more planeswalkers to join the Gatewatch in their fight against the evils on different planes?
That remains to be seen. I mean, there's no, other than taking an oath, there's no official, recruiting process, right? So if along the way some other characters feel like they have an ideology and motivation that fits with the rest of the Gatewatch, there's a chance.
I think we saw on Innistrad sort of what happens when the members of the Gatewatch, the 4 members of the Gatewatch at that point, interacted with 2 different planeswalkers. And Liliana said, sure, I'll join up. And Tamiyo said, no thanks. So as their journeys continue, we'll see how they interact with other planeswalkers.
Right. Another question from the internet. Ashiok and the Aetherborn share a lot of similarities. Is Ashiok one of them?
Ashiok is not an Aetherborn. There's a lot of similarities, though. The non-binary of their gender, the kind of smoky look to some of the disintegration. But although we kind of knew that players would ask this question, no, there's no intended connection between the Aetherborn of Kaladesh and Ashiok.
I have a pretty simple question. I know that sometimes when you guys are creating a world, you sort of build the world first and then create the mechanics after, and sometimes it's the opposite, where you're looking more at the mechanics and then building the world from there. And I was curious which process you used for Kaladesh.
All right. I feel like I was in every single one of the parts of that process. It's usually not that simple either way. And Kaladesh in particular had a lot of back and forth. We weren't sure whether the energy mechanic was going to end up in the Kaladesh set. We really hoped it did because we were really excited about the ether sphere and the role of ether in this world.
Right. That's why you can't see it in Origins, right? Like you don't see any ether in Origins. We already knew we were going to Kaladesh for real, but we didn't know how firm that mechanic was. So we were like, well, it's not wrong. You just zoom the camera a little higher. It was just out of shot, if we do it.
Ultimately, though, it came down to this was a world that was, the idea was let's go to a world that focuses on artifacts first. So it was like a card type that rooted everything, and we went from there. But it was so much back and forth after that seed was created. I mean, we would not have ended up where we did in the really nice, tight flavor mechanical connection we did for Kaladesh without tons of communication and are you doing this? Well, then we'll do this. Are we going to commit to vehicles? Because then we're going to draw a bunch of pictures of vehicles. We have a bunch of pictures of vehicles. Please don't take vehicles out of the set, that kind of thing. Like that would mess up a few things. And I distinctly remember being in a meeting with Ian Duke, and we were looking at some of the difficult challenges in balancing the ether system or the energy system. And I was in that meeting going like, please don't decide that we need to rip it out, please. We have some really cool pictures of filigree pipes with awesome ether flowing through it. I would really like to claim that is the energy mechanic. Please don't strand us with a lot of sweet art. But it worked out, and I'm really excited that it did.
I have a quick preface. The first one is that this question is not loaded, and the second is I've talked about it a lot with my friends, and I have the opportunity to ask. So in Magic the Gathering, angels are women and demons are men. And we see a lot of cards like Angelic Destiny and Call to Serve that allow mortals to transcend do men who become angels become women, and simultaneously do women who fall into demons become men? I don't expect you exactly have an answer. I just thought I'd ask.
I don't think so. Like the reason that angels default to female in magic is just to move it away from real world, religious representation, right? And the default for demons being male is so you can cut them apart and blow them up and not feel bad about it, right? They're just monsters that you chew through without guilt. Now, beyond that, on cards that represent mortals ascending into angels, that is, we stick to it to make it less jarring. We have represented winged males before. It's something that could be the feature of a plane, right? Like, female for angel is a default. It's not the only thing we ever do, right? And a lot of times, just out of necessity, those cards are like, this creature gains flying and a pile of other things. And it's like, well, we could show their head exploding into birds, but that's weird for white. So maybe they turn into an angel, and if they do, it's just less jarring, given the default that it's female.
All right, another question from social media. In a world of inventors, scholars, and machines, what will green be like on Kaladesh?
So we talked a little bit about this in the world building panel yesterday. We did want to take a different route with green this time. In Mirrodin, green was about smushing artifacts, and we wanted a world that did not have a whole color devoted to hating on the idea of making awesome inventions. So everybody's included here. So you're going to see a merging of nature and artifacts in green in Kaladesh. The elves here take inspiration directly from nature and build that right into their inventions.
Yeah, you see it very literally in the artwork too. I mean, we started with some of their weaponry and just had these pieces of metal just with woven sticks in the middle of them and stuff like that. And we're like, yeah, that's pretty satisfying. That's awesome. So let's run with it.
I mean, it was a huge challenge too, like trying to find that fine line between technology and sort of organic. I wouldn't even call it organic, I guess, but it was as if the metal was grown. So that became a real big challenge to map that across the culture and not make it look like chrome silly putty, which can be.
We'll save that idea for later.
Yeah. Oh yeah, don't take that idea.
Esper gets chrome silly putty.
Oh,
that's Esper.
Hi, I started playing Magic in 2002, and around that time there was a huge focus on inanimate objects and powerful spells that had precedence over the creatures. For example, Mirari from Odyssey, or even just the Moxen in Black Lotus. Will we ever see a time again where those types of things are more important than specific characters in the story?
Are you asking whether an important artifact could play a role in this, like an important role in the story? Is that the question?
Like the focus being more on very iconic inanimate objects.
Certainly there's a chance for that kind of thing to happen along the way. I don't think we're going to give up focus on characters as for the main plot. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I think the way that Mirari founded a whole story, right, was very unique, and I think that kind of thing could happen again. But it would have to reflect on how the characters interact with it, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if I answer your question.
And remember, the Mirari ended up a creature, right?
So. That's true.
Hi. On Kaladesh, how does the economy work? Especially when we talk about the Aetherborn, which are the ones that are consuming most of the stuff, but they only live a year. So how do they gain? How do they spend money? If they only live a year?
I'm not going to go into depth on the economy, but I did, as I was writing the art book, have to go back to the world building team and say, okay, so these guys are rich, how do they get their money? So when a new Aetherborn comes into existence an existing Etherborn will take that one into their care. They don't have family lines literally, but they do in effect have family lines to pass on that wealth to the next generation, as it were.
It's a rolling trust fund.
Doesn't that go against like the Etherborn's will of live life to the fullest? It's like when they die, shouldn't they have like no money to give away?
I do think that there's a gigantic party thrown right before the end. That's certainly true. Don't pass away with most of your funds intact.
But most of the people that they spend the money, when they're planning the party, the people that they give the money to are other Etherborn. So it just goes to a different family.
Etherborn caterers.
As I walked in here and I was looking around, I realized that the Paramount is like a very golden theater, and it kind of fits the theme of Kaladesh. Was that intentional, or did it just kind of fall into place perfectly?
We didn't know PAX was going to be in here. Picking it as a venue may well have factored into that thinking may have factored into it. But a lot of the similarity is just because, like, at the base, what is remarkable about this theater is the amount of hand craftsmanship, right? It looks like someone loved every little piece of detailing in here. And Kaladesh, even though a lot of the shapes are different, that was very much the same thing. Like, someone has cared about every level of this place and done a great job making it beautiful. And so, unsurprisingly, they work together pretty well.
When we walked in here, I looked around and I was actually impressed that I think there is more filigree in this theater than there is in the art, in the set. And I was like, we could have done more. We could have tortured the artists harder.
we talked about that. We should have come to this theater at the beginning of the concept push.
Right, just take pictures.
And just take pictures like this. Let's do top down the Paramount Theater as a world. But that was absolutely part of the process of selecting this venue, just because it worked really well.
Question from social media. Now that we're seeing a bigger focus on intrapersonal relationships in the story, do you think that romance is a possibility in Magic Story?
So one of the reasons we wanted to focus on the Gatewatch at all, one of the reasons why we wanted to do this story was to get these characters together. Planeswalkers and Magic had a tendency to kind of spread out and be, moody loners by themselves. And the Gatewatch is not just a cool storyline, but it's also a way to force interpersonal relationships. And so we expect fights to break out, we expect friendships to form, and dependencies that could possibly one day lead to feelings beyond friendship. That's to be seen.
We also, one of the things that has fascinated me is the nature of relationships between planeswalkers and people who are not planeswalkers. What happens when Tamio goes off and leaves her family behind on Kamigawa? So I'm glad that we've had a chance to touch on that. There's a tragedy there, but that's also part of the reason that she didn't join the Gatewatch.
Does Jace regret becoming the Guild Pact? He seems to have way more obligation to a plane than any other planeswalker.
That's true. It's sort of inconvenient for Jace to have this massive, important commitment to the plane of Ravnica and not simultaneously be part of a team of planeswalkers that's going from plane to plane. Does he regret being the living Guild Pact? I don't think he regrets solving the puzzle that was going on during the Dragon's Maze, but I think that the responsibilities that were implied by the station were not clear to him at the beginning. Like, this is what I won. This is great. No, super. Okay, there's a lot of paperwork, and I have to talk to a lot of ambassadors from the guilds. Man, I got to make an illusion and leave. Like, I do think that that's part of his tension right now.
We have time for one more question. That's a lot of pressure. I'm wondering what the process of flavor text creation looks like from your side, and if you have any particular pieces that are favorites from the long, long history of Magic.
From our side, so we employ a bunch of freelance writers and write many pieces ourselves. So the process looks like there's a database where submissions are sent. And we comb through that database, and there's a process of voting where people internal to Wizards are rating various pieces that they find are strong or that fit the card really well. And then there's a selection process. After the selection process, there's usually tweaking. After the tweaking, there's an editing step. After the editing step, there's more tweaking. After the tweaking, development changes the card, and we have to toss the piece, and we try to pay the person anyway. But it's there's a lot of back and forth. So that's the process of how flavor text comes to be born. Does that answer your question?
That concludes our panel. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your
Thanks,
questions.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we get up and leave now, right?
I think so.